Oh, that's maybe too loud.
Ready? Okay, hello.
Oh,
Let's get started, please, and welcome to the last Senate meeting of 2019. Do you not like to sit? So we have Stacy Pearson and Olivia Yang today that are going to give us an update on the process they're developing for capital budgets, and I'll just pass it right over. Okay, who's starting? Okay.
I am going to turn on. So you can hear me? Great. It's been a few months since I've been here, so hello again. And I'm Stacy Pearson. I'm the CFO at Washington State University. And today we want to talk to you about our capital budgeting process. And this is a presentation that we have made to many groups on campus, as well as the regents. And we'll walk you through what it is we're trying to do. That one? Okay. No. Okay. So we have a lot of processes at WSU that maybe aren't well coordinated. I know you're surprised, but in the area of capital projects, that is one of those. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about not my background so much. You probably know enough about that. But when I did oversee a capital budgeting process in another state, what happened is in that state, we didn't get capital money for buildings. It was, we would get money for maintenance and repairs and that type of thing. And then we went through the recession. So what we tried to do was create a capital budgets process that would enable us to identify what our critical needs were and then utilize not only the state budget process to ask for money, but we would also use the same information to ask donors for money, to engage in public-private partnerships. So it was a holistic of these are our needs, these are our priorities, and then we could take that to each group that would be a potential funding source. And in the state I came from, that included the students because our students paid a building fee, and we would use that building fee to bond some of these facilities. So the outcome of that is you might see an academic facility that had 3 different funding sources. We might have, some money from the state. We might have some money from private donors, and then we would have an amount that we were going to bond off of the student building fee. But we could take that same presentation of information to every group. We could take it to the legislature. We could take it to our regents. We could take it to the students. And then every year that we did that, we also showed them what we did do. We showed the buildings that we built, how they were funded, and so on and so forth. And we also used it to ensure that we were budgeting for the O&M, the operations and maintenance on the building. So that is one of the kind of the premises for working on this. Plus, Olivia was nagging me that we needed this coordinated capital budgets process. So that's what it is. It is based on, it needs to be based on our strategic plan, so Drive to 25 and our strategic plan, which I think are one and the same, or at least should be, and have overlaps. And it's prioritized needs. So the difference in this process isn't that tell me what you want in terms of I want this building, I want new labs, I want this. Tell us what your needs are, because if you go out to the academic community and we focus on your needs, let people who do planning of buildings and facilities do the work to create those projects. So it's prioritizing those needs, and we're also trying to deal in this process with replacement of our aging infrastructure. The Pullman campus has $1.4 billion in deferred maintenance, and you'll see, I bet, again, that's not a surprise to you. We've got some older facilities, and so if we can use this process to also identify, hey, let's put this building here and replace this old building in this location, we take that deferred maintenance offline. We've already got the O&M money to help support the new building, so that's another piece of this process. And then leverage funding partnerships, which was what I just explained to you, and also that it's inclusive and transparent. So our goal is really to show the whole campus and everybody, these are our capital plans, this is why. The list is much longer than the funding, but at least you can see what's getting funded and why and how it ties to the strategic plan. So that's the premise for this, and I'm going to have Olivia walk through some of our challenges and other things. Do you want to
Can you hear me?
see if there's questions?
You can hear me? Oh, questions.
I heard somebody. No? Okay, well, we can ask questions later.
Yeah, stop me if you have questions, stop me if you can't hear. So what are some of the problems facing us today on the capital side? So let me start with that, because the notion is when we get money, then, you know, we get your needs, we understand what the problem is, and we try to solve it with the resources that we have. So believe it or not, we have too much space. Now, I know everybody's saying, what do you mean you have too much space? I wanted an office, I couldn't get it, I have faculty coming in. What do you mean you have too much space? Well, what I mean is we have a lot of space, but it isn't the right space. So this is like insult on injury. We have a lot of space, doesn't work. And on the third hand, we don't have enough money to maintain the space that we have. And so I'm not just here to whine about it, just to give you a metric. When we get capital money from the state, we also get, after the building is done, we also get O&M money, operations and maintenance, which is utilities, maintenance, custodial, grounds, et cetera, et cetera. In the current period, when we have, say, a lab building, we ask for $12 a foot, okay, because that's how we calculate based on a certain maintenance level. So there are industry standards, you know, 1 to 5, we always ask in the middle, so we're not reactive decline or managed decline, and we're not showcase, we're in the middle. And that works out for many buildings at 12. So we get 9. Okay, well, life sucks, but you know, that's how it is. As a metric, though, if you look at all of our buildings on average, compared to the 12 or 9, we're at about 2 or 3. So this is in some ways because when the state funds us for O&M, there is no inflation. So back in the day when Bryan Hall was built, they gave us money. That's the same amount of money, more or less. I mean, over time, there's been some increases. So that's a big part of the problem. The other problem is what I said. We have a lot of space that isn't well used, and therefore, it forces us into spreading the money very thin, making us compromising our ability to give you all the space you need for teaching and research. So that's what we're talking about. That's one of the premises that we start with. So one thing that is useful to remember is in the Drive to 25, the problems are 25% too much space, 25% underfunding in the annual O&M. So it's kind of a cool but sad metric. So when I talk about too much space, so if you look at the bottom left, it says sightlines. That's one of the consultants that we and the other 5 universities in the state of Washington hired to help us understand our deferred maintenance and space utilization problem. And so you see that there are these universities. What Sightlines does is they are a national firm. They consult with a lot of universities across the country. They found certain universities that fit our profile. As it turns out, all but 2 of these are also our Drive to 25 peers. They use Alphabet so that it's, you know, protects the privacy of those firms, of those universities. But you see where we are compared to the universities on program space per student and research space as a percentage of state GSF. Then you look at the 2 bars. One bar is our research peer average, and the other bar is our Pac-12 and land grant average. So we have a lot of space per cap, not just space per capita. So here's another metric. This is actually based on a study that I'm told the University of Minnesota did once upon a time. They studied how much space a department should have depending on what the department does. So if your chemistry, your FTE space should be X. If your electrical engineering, it should be Y, et cetera, et cetera. So we took that metric and applied it to our own. And so on the gray bar where it says existing, that's our space. And on the red, where it says modeled, is if we were following the Minnesota metric, this is what we should have. So you see, we even using that particular metric, we have a lot of space. There's a third metric that we were not able to get into this PowerPoint. NSF recently released their space study. So I think we're number 17 in space usage per capita. So yeah, drive to top 25, right? Wrong metric, 17 out of whatever, but wrong metric. Anyway, so, and then underfunding of O&M. So I kind of explained the metric and how we got there, but here's some more data. And this is kind of a busy chart, but look at the bottom where it says current maintenance staffing, 123,000 GSF per FTE. That means that in the maintenance mechanic world, we have one maintenance FTE per 123,000 gross square feet. Compared to in the bottom, our research peers are 95,000. So that's like 30%. And in the middle, it says if we don't do anything about this, they will soon maintain from 123,000 gross to 186,000 gross. So you can imagine this is difficult to pull off, difficult to respond to your issues when you call in a timely manner. So when you call and we're slow in getting to you, it's not for lack of caring. It's like there's a lot of things that we have to prioritize. This one shows custodial similarly. It's not as bad, but it's not great. So we maintain 67,000 square feet per FTE. Our peers maintain 43. If we did nothing, 67 turns into 101 in 10 years. So, I mean, just imagine you're trying to clean 101,000, well, even 67,000 square feet. And then grounds is actually pretty good. We maintain 36 acres per FTE. Our peers are at 40, so we're doing better. But if we don't do anything, then it's 54 acres per FTE. Questions so far? Okay. So, and then we talk about the conditions. Okay, so this is some of my favorite slides. So the bars here talk about the different utility systems. These are the things that you don't see because it's under the road. Chilled water distribution, domestic water distribution, electrical, and both of these are, it's usually the production of the utility and the distribution of the utility. Now, I don't know if it's common knowledge, but power is the only thing we buy. We have our own wells, and we have our own steam plant. You must see it on Grimes and on College. And of course, the sanitary sewer, we collect that and then we send it to Pullman. And of course, there's roads and things like that. So this chart has different colors, and the colors is based on this notion called the Facilities Condition Index, FCI. So if you talk to us facilities people and we start jabbering about FCI, what it means is you take the cost, it's a ratio. Take the cost to repair, divide by the cost to replace. So you want that ratio to be as small as possible, because if you have $10 to repair a $10 thing, it's like, why, right? So what we did is we did them in color, green, yellow, red, and black, based on the ratio, black being the worst. So what we're showing you here is, on the left of each set of charts is today's condition of that particular utility, and on the right is if we did nothing for 10 years. By the way, I keep talking about 10. We actually did this 2 years ago, so we got 8 to go. Just saying. So this is not a pretty picture. And when we ask for utilities money, people go, oh, you're just, feathering your nest. Well, actually, no, because if we lose water, for example, we have to shut the campus down. So we're not doing this to make ourselves happy. We're doing this because if we had no water, just Monday, I think, we lost a feeder. Fortunately, it was down on Grimes and affected a lot of the auxiliary buildings, not the buildings that most of you are in, although I think for vet med, some of those buildings were there. So those buildings were out of commission for a couple hours while we scurried around to try to patch things back. Yes?
I'm really concerned about storm sewer and sanitary sewer.
But what?
The flooding we had in Pullman.
Yes, yes.
Pullman also had this.
Yes, Pullman also has a problem. Well, if it's any comfort, and I take very small comfort in it, deferred maintenance is a national problem for everybody. So you talk about dams, you talk about freeways, you talk about bridges, you talk about Flint with their water problem in Michigan. So we're not alone. Doesn't mean that we should sit back and go, oh, it's okay, it's the trendy thing to do. It's not. It's a very bad situation because we are here to support what you do, and we can't do it if our infrastructure is broken. So this, again, is facility index condition. And what we did in the bottom, I know you can't see it, but we'll be happy to, Pullman only, all the buildings that we have, what we did is, again, we put them in the colors based on the FCI. So you see a lot of black, red, yellow, green. So we took that and we put it in a map. Some of you may have seen this. So you see what's black, red, yellow, green. So here's Stadium Way, Stadium French. The building we're in is actually a little bit out of the picture, I think. So in 10 years, it looks like this, if we don't do anything. I'm not making this shit up. This is for real. So you see why we get kind of anxious, and you see why, every chance I get, I talk about, we gotta do something. Anyway, so this is the part where we talk about what we're trying to do. As Stacy said before, we're trying to come up with a process that is inclusive of all of our needs, but inclusive of all the money as well. So this is all funds, all needs, to get us to Drive to 25, our strategic plan. Again, to be as inclusive as possible. What I like to say is we're in this together. So if we go down, we all go down. If you go down, we go down. And to be as transparent as possible. It's been my perception that capital budgeting is some kind of magic. It's actually not. And we'd like to show it to you at the risk of showing you maybe how sausage is being made. So the things that we are talking about in this process is, first of all, the needs. Now, those of you who have been doing this before may remember that you will send in projects with an estimate. I need a new building, 60 million. I want a new building too, 60 million. If he got 60 million, I want 60 million. Well, the thing is, it doesn't help us prioritize. What's happened in the past is like everybody stands in line for their 60 million. Well, it doesn't distribute the resource properly to the greatest need we found. So we're asking you for your needs. So as an example of that, we were in a meeting with some of your facilities people, and somebody said, I don't know how to answer your question, what are your needs? Should I tell you what my needs are, or should I just tell you I need a new building? No, don't tell me you need a new building. Tell me why you need a new building. That way we can help you talk about whether your needs are best met in a new building, or in a renovation, or in two buildings, or in two renovations. So we want to help you solve the problem. And instead of you telling us what you think the solution is, we would like to help you formulate that solution. So when we do that, we're going to take your needs and combine them with the deferred maintenance needs, with the notion that if we had a penny and you had a penny, then together we have 2 pennies, and we're trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So instead of keeping up with the trend of building new buildings, we're saying, I need 3 biology labs. Well, great. Why don't we renovate the whole floor at Eastlake and do that? That way, we improve the infrastructure in Eastlake so that it can continue to support labs, and we get you modern labs instead of the old labs, modern configurations. And we recently did that, actually. We asked the state for $5 million. We got one, but we were able to do one lab anyway. We got 1 million out of 5. Able to do one lab anyway, and it was very successful. So they're very happy with that. So we're trying to see if we can get more money. But what that's saying is, instead of 60 million for one building, if we had 61 million projects, imagine how much good we can do. So once we take the needs and kind of put them together with the infrastructure needs that we also have, we would then prioritize those on criteria, and I'll show you that in a minute. Then we'll score all the needs based on that criteria. And then we have a set of prioritized needs, and looking to the 21-23 state capital budget request, because the reality is most of our capital money still comes from the state. We're trying to ramp up on development money. One day we will be able to bond, but for the present time, it's still state. And so we take the prioritized needs and we see what we can do about putting it in the state capital request for 21-23. And as Stacy said, once you have the needs and can build a story, then you can start talking about other fund sources beyond the state. Questions so far? We're good? Okay. So the timeline kind of goes like this. Earlier, Stacy had released the criteria and the needs statement. It's a form. Some of you may have seen it already. We had asked for input on the criteria November 6th. November 14, Stacy and I presented this very same presentation to the Infrastructure Committee of the Board of Regents. On Friday of next week, we're asking chancellors, vice presidents, deans to turn in their needs as well as the omnibus requests that you may have. Then what we will do, and we kind of know what everybody's needs are because for the last 1.5 years, we've been visiting the deans. So we've been writing down what their needs are. And so far, we've not seen surprises yet. So February 15, we would then score these and say, here are the needs. Using the criteria, this is what we did. So going back to the transparency, what we'd like to do, and you see what we've done is we said, here's what we think the criteria. What do you think? We did get some comments back, so I'll get into that in a minute. Then we're going to say, here are all the needs that we have from everybody. So everybody sees what everybody submitted as far as needs. So there's criteria that's public, needs that are public. Then we're going to score it. And then we're going to come back to everybody. So you'll have to see us again and say, based on the criteria, the needs, this is what we did. Do you have a problem? Do you disagree? That way, there's no magic. There it is. This is what we think. It's very objective. And then we would take input, turn it into leadership to make the final decisions. Knowing, of course, that a couple of realities, more needs than there's money, as Stacy said. And at some point, I think we need to let the president have the flexibility to say, I understand this is an important need, but because of X, Y, and Z reason, we need to shove this from 3 to 4 or whatever. Because those are kind of the legislative realities, so we just need to give him the flexibility to do that. So in March, after we've...
Just a pause. So those might remain in the same priority order because they're the priority. Shifts might be made for political realities, legislature.
I'm sorry, could you use the microphone, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. But then when we go for another funding source, those priorities might still remain the same.
Can you start again? I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. I didn't want to interfere with her with that, so I turned it off. So even though those priorities can get adjusted for a particular request, that doesn't mean that they are no longer the priority. It means that for a legislative ask, we've determined that this one's going to have a greater chance of being funded. So, but then we still use that same priority list for those other funding asks or projects that we're working on.
And that's, I think, that's the biggest thing that's different here. You have the needs. They're not the project, they're the needs. And then you have to say, okay, that's a need, put that down. Then you have to say, where can I get the money? And which of these needs will be most attractive to this funding source or that funding source? So you have something that the state says, forget it, I'm not doing that. And you go, okay, it's important. State's not doing it. We're not going to put it in the state request. We're going to put it somewhere else. Okay, finishing up with the timeline. In March, we hope to take the state capital budget request to the regions. And by the end of April, we will send out the list and we'll vet this with everybody again. And starting in May, we will start putting the state documents together. They asked for a lot of documents. And so we're going to start doing that all the way through September. What happens after September is, because we turned the request into the governor's office for the state request, then the governor puts out his request mid-December, session starts in January, House and Senate puts out their version, and then there's a compromise conference session, the consensus version, and that's our state requests that we get. Okay? So let me talk about the pieces of this, because this sort of gets into the reality of the state funding. So if you look ahead to a year from now, the pieces in the state request will look like this. There are previous commitments that have already been made. So for example, Vancouver, we got pre-design money. By the way, you all know that in a major project, it takes 6 years. Pre-design, design, and construction, 2 years apiece. So Vancouver, we asked for pre-design and got it. We asked for design, didn't get it. Vancouver design is in the supplemental ask. Spokane, we asked for pre-design and got it. So 21-23, we'll be asking for design. Pullman Life Sciences, this is the building that we might have touched on once upon a time when we talked about parking. This is a building on the site of Field Hall. We're going to ask again for pre-design. This is a facility that we think addresses a lot of needs, both the teaching, the research, as well as the infrastructure needs, because if you look at the laboratories in arts and sciences, they do need a bit of attention. Pardon me? Then there's minors. You all know about minors, right? MCI, MCR. MCR is for building preservation. MCI, which we haven't gotten until this year, is program renewal. And just to give you a sad state of the situation, when we compiled the list of MCI, program renewal, we had a list of 22 million. We got 5. So in a way, that's why we need to know what the needs are and how to prioritize them, because this is one of those shrinking and expanding things. So you'll have the previous commitments, you'll have the minors, new majors as they may come up, and the standalone is something new. So when you talk about majors, you start at 10 million and up. When you talk about minors, it's 2 million and less. When we've talked to your deans, we find that a lot of the needs are actually between 2 and 10. And like, okay, so this will never get funded if you only do minors and majors, unless you rope in all your majors and you stand in line for your $60 million building, which, depending on where you are in the list, I mean, you could be dead before you get your building. So what we said is, what's to stop us from asking for these? They call them various things, mini majors, standalones, whatever. The beauty of those is that you actually don't have to wait 6 years. So I'm going, duh, no brainer, right? Solve the problem, get the money, instant gratification if we can get it. So we're going to be asking for those. To make it easy to tell our story, what we'd like to do is put them in buckets. So I mentioned the Eastlake Lab. We had asked for 5. This is our first foray at a mini major. We got 1. Okay, fine, that's fine. But Eastlake becomes a becomes one of the projects under the bucket of STEM laboratories. You could have another bucket that's, for example, student success. You can have another bucket that is research support. The infrastructure, buildings, laboratories for research that need help. You could even have a you know, water tank, believe it or not, because our water tanks are like, they're almost as old as me, and they need help. And if we lose water, we have to like send people home, and that's pretty drastic for us.
So when she says buckets, that's the themes that's on the slide.
Yeah. So
Just so you know.
we facilities people, we talk buckets. So a real generic example of that is you say, we have a mobility initiative. So it would include elevators, because we know our elevators, we typically have one elevator per building. When they fall apart, what's somebody supposed to do, especially if you're mobility impaired. So it's things like that. And what we'd like to do is wait until we get all the needs, and then we start to say, let's prioritize them, and then say, okay, these ones go into these ones, these stories. Does that make sense? Did you have a question, Adrian? Okay. All right, so this is very small, and we'll be happy to send this out to everybody. So this is, imagine this is two sides. So the left-hand side is your standard textbook criteria in prioritizing capital projects. Your university, you have capital money to invest. Where are you going to spend your money? Well, what is it that you do? Well, we teach and we do research. So if it helps teaching, it helps research, it should get some money. And what we've done is we said, well, what exactly does learning mean? So you talk about the output, retention, graduation, et cetera, et cetera. We did get a comment on this. The comment was the university actually has 3 missions. It includes outreach and engagement. So we're going to add a third. And we also got a comment that research is also economic development. So under research, we're going to add economic development. The set of criteria on the right is a little bit different. It is not unlike what some other universities do. We separated out because we thought that given our current situation, financial situation, facilities situation, we needed to focus on that. So what we're saying is risk mitigation, compliance, annual facilities. If they are not in compliance with ALAC or ACOC, we get fined. I guess the people in BetMed, Connors are familiar with that sort of problem. We also have space optimization. So you remember we were talking about too much space. So if there is a project that can group needs and put them in smaller but better space, then that falls under that criteria. Ideally, we group projects, put them in better space, and eventually we vacate enough of a building that we can tear it down. And then that money can be applied to the rest of the portfolio so that instead of an average of $2 or $3 a foot, if you whack out enough buildings, you start to talk about real savings. And finally, we have the deferred maintenance. So if you're doing something like Eastlick, and we do half the money for the labs itself and the other half to improve the mechanical electrical system so that when you turn the fume hood on, something actually happens. That's the sort of thing that we're talking about. Okay, this is just a copy of the needs template. So if you look at it, you'll see that we don't really ask for an estimate. We ask you, tell us your problem. Tell us what good will come if we can solve this problem for you. And that's how we're approaching the whole thing about the needs. It's not about how much or what the scope is necessarily. And then
That's what's due this 13th.
Yes.
Yeah.
This and this is the omnibus. MCI typically, we would ask the state for equipment money under minor capital, and so this is the forms. Actually, this is the same form. And so this is kind of our roadshow. We're doing this to let everybody know what we're doing, get input. And as I said before, we're going to score and then come back and show you the score. So there's no magic. And I just want to say, before everybody's mad, you know we have a lot of needs. We don't have a lot of resources. And so we can't fund everything. But we will tell you why you didn't get funded. At least you know. And just because you don't get funded this time doesn't mean it won't happen next time, because as things improve under Stacy financially, other funding sources will be available, like bonds. And as the capital campaign ramps up, we will have advantage opportunities there as well. So these are all the people that we've gone to already with our show. And this is
Oh, I think my mic is on now. So coordination of this process with other funding opportunities is something that I talked about at the beginning. And again, the focus of this discussion is preparing everybody with the timeline to do the request for the capital budget process with the state. But meanwhile, we've been meeting with Advancement. We've been meeting with, I know, College of Engineering on their needs to say, hey, what are some of the other partnership opportunities? And in particular, public-private partnerships. So again, by using this process, we hope to put all the information in one place and be able to share that information with the different parties that come along. And so that we have a tendency to compete with ourselves if we say, oh, well, for this list, we'll use, for this purpose, we'll use this list. We really need to focus on getting those needs met. And of course, in this environment, gathering all of the possible funding sources that we can. And then by having that list, if an opportunity pops up or somebody else wants to do a partnership, then we can say, oh, well, yeah, we have a project right here that we think we could participate with. So that's why we've been talking to a lot of people about this, and then just focusing on that coordination, multiple funding sources, including when, possibly you get most of your funding for a building and there's just a little bit left. Then once we get our strategic reserves built up, then we can maybe move a project ahead faster than we have been able to in the past. So this is process in anticipation of funding. And while we're still recovering from our fiscal recovery, having good processes in place so that we can leverage the resources that we're going to get can help. I will also say we're looking at a very similar process for operating budget, because again, there are things that we can ask for that might help the operations of the colleges and things that could follow a similar process. Yes.
Let's remind everybody they need a mic before they ask a question we ever run.
Matt Carroll, School of the Environment. First, my first comment is that this is a welcome change. Having represented this body in Olympia and having known a lot of department chairs over the years, capital planning has been completely hidden from the faculty. So at least we don't have responsibility for the mess that we're in now as a faculty. But the fact that the faculty are now being brought in is I think, a really welcome change. So I have two questions. One is, this determination of need. It has seemed to me over the years that that research has always tended to be prioritized over teaching. In other words, when we build a building, and people will say, well, let's put a large classroom in that building. Well, then we have to pay sales tax on that space, because research buildings, you don't have to, if they're 100% research, you don't have to pay sales tax. So that's been used as a reason to not build additional teaching facilities. Now, in fairness, we did build the Q and we did build the Spark building, so that's changed a little bit. But who makes that ultimate determination about whether teaching or research is a bigger need in a given situation?
So I've been here a bit longer than Stacy, so I'll try to be the speculative historian here. First of all, the rebate on research space and research equipment, that program is over, so
Okay.
we can't use that excuse anymore.
That's good.
I think the president before Elson, yes, Dr. Rollins, was very interested in research, growing research as economic development to, rising tide and boats and all that. That's how come we have all that investment in the Rex complex, which actually bears his name now. So a lot of those facilities, state funded, were a reflection of his priorities, his priority on research. Now, having said that, Deborah Carlson has been extremely vigilant about always carving out money for general use classrooms. And so there's always some money to improve the equipment in the classrooms. We have 130 GUCs. So I know $1 million compared to 60 is like, duh, but that's the balance that we had. What we're trying to do is to have a bigger conversation so that questions that you just raised get answered visibly. And again, this is one of those things where, you know, you're going to watch sausage being made and it might get icky. You might not like the answer, but at least you know what happened to the extent possible.
Thanks. My second question is, I don't see the athletic program specifically mentioned in some of these charts and tables. Are they on a completely separate sort of a decision process from the rest of us, or
So
not?
in the determination of needs, the letter asking for needs did go to Pat Chong. And I know they're putting their needs together, and we kind of know what their needs are because we've been working with them. You know, indoor practice, baseball, you know, was one of their needs. That's, again, the separation of needs and funding. So we got your needs, got it, you know. College A, college B, housing has needs. And then you talk about funding. Where's the money coming from? Athletic projects probably won't get state funding. They will rely on mostly donors. Housing, for example. If you talk to Terry Boston, his big priority is Wilmer Davis, renovating Wilmer Davis, and when our reserves are in better shape, he has reserves that's ready to go. So all needs, and then prioritizing them, and then say, all right, where's the money coming from? Because the money will come from different places. We need to just separate out that needs is automatically state funded. As Stacy said, there are a lot of universities that look at multiple needs. Multiple fund sources. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay.
Hi, Eric Rolfson, School Biological Sciences. My question is, I mean, these are really dire projections. I mean, the current situation is dire and the projections are even more dire. How is the legislature responding to that, or are they? Because kind of status quo or slow reductions in this kind of capital support are not sustainable. And if there isn't a change in Olympia, it seems like there's very little we can do. And so I'm just curious if you have an impression about how serious they are taking these needs for the university.
So let me try to answer that first, and then I'll stand next to Stacy so she can kick me. I'll answer this in two parts. When I talk with Chris Mulick, and you all know who Chris Mulick is, he's our government affairs person in Olympia. He will talk about the fact that in the legislature and in the governor's office, the emphasis right now is mental. And so that, in some ways, they kind of think, well, we have a leg turn. Now we have to do McCleary. And coming up, we're going to have to do mental health. So that's one point. The other point is some 3-4 years ago. You remember that slide from Sightlines? This is all the universities getting together, and we actually hired Sightline as a group. So the universities have been talking about this problem. We have a problem, UW has a problem, the other 4 also have a problem. Actually, the other 4's problem is not as bad, but then they have less money than we have. So we've been talking about this problem. There is not yet any decision about how the Council of Presidents will take the message forward. There's a potential for that, and whether it's all 6 or just the 2 research universities, I don't know. The third thing I will say, and this is very boring of me, but as an example, in the supplemental budget, there's something like 400, for the capital supplemental, something like $400 million of requests is what we're told. And they have 70 million available. So, and if you talk to Colleen Kern, you all know who Colleen is. When the recession hit, both operating and capital budget took a hit. Operating has been getting better at a slightly better rate, in her opinion, than the capital. And so, of course, as you can imagine, capital is related to operating because, you know, capital is funded by bonds and you have to pay your bonds. And so depends on how big your paycheck is before you can decide how big a mortgage you can get, right? So there's a lot of complications about this. I don't think I think the legislature and the office, the governor's office is aware of this, but I think to be fair to them, as I said before, this problem, everybody has this problem. And so we have to come to them with a solution of how can we solve our own problems to some extent. I know this, you don't look happy, and I don't blame you.
Well, and this process is trying to address some of that because the answer isn't all in new buildings when we have this aged infrastructure. So those themes, standalones can help us maybe do a series of lab upgrades, for instance, and do that on a more timely basis. The other thing is there's a lot of things in the industry that are changing. For instance, maybe you've visited campuses that will have a research lab facility with, quote, flexible lab space. So you have to have a grant to be in that lab space, but when you no longer have a grant or you decide you don't want to get another one, you move and somebody else moves in. So some universities have used that to say, this is how we're going to optimize, you know, our lab space so that, you know, if it's going to take forever to build a separate research building for specific discipline, we at least have that space available. The other is we are actually considering, would we be able to do an ask for demo money if we have found the funding to build a new building? So a demo of a major facility is what, 10 million? And so, you know, being able to take that piece of it and say, we know that if this building comes down and we could put this new building, say that Life Plant Sciences, in that right location, not take up more parking, that's a good way to, you know, to get some of this on the move. We've never done that before. We're talking to UW also about, hey, you know, if you'd consider that, because this is an area that we can work with UW on you know, making a case with the legislature about our aged infrastructure. So,
I think I'll add one more thing. You recall I said 25% too much space, 25% underfunded, right? So you look at this as, I look at this as cost per foot. Cost per foot is bad. We need more money. Well, if you don't get more money, but you have less space, then your cost per foot gets better. And so I guess this is the message we're trying to give you. I think that next to parking, probably space is very emotional. Well, what we're saying is, what if we could get smaller spaces, but better? And if we could do that across the board, and then I'll use this peanut butter analogy. Once upon a time, we had a loaf of bread and a pot of peanut butter. Over time, we kept adding bread. The peanut butter was still one jar. Then we had bread that was old and moldy, and it's like, dude, who would eat that? But we kept it. That's what we're doing with our buildings. We're keeping buildings that don't serve their purpose anymore. They should be put out of their misery, or they should be given a, you know, Botox makeover. Get new life. And this is what we need your help on, because I know that it's very sensitive to say, you need to go from this office to a smaller office. You need to now teach in a classroom that's further away. But it's for a good cause, because if we don't all do our little bit, this is just not going to change. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
You send the email?
We have email addresses, so you can.
Anybody that has a question, Stacy will answer.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your transparency and straightforward. So we have quorum. All right. Okay, I'd like to call to order, please. Approval of the minutes of November 14th. Are there any changes or additions to the minutes of November 14th? Okay, announcements, let's see. Information items, minor change bulletin number 6. I'm not going to go through that. That's just there for reading. And I'm going to go to the reports. And I don't have a report. I've asked AG to talk about the small working group in relation to EB 29. And then Dave's going to talk about an update on the provost search.
Hi. Sure, I'll do that. I'm A.G. Rudd, past chair again, Redux, past chair again of the Faculty Senate. I was asked by President Schultz to be part of a small, what he's calling a small working group on the roles and responsibilities of deans, vice presidents, and chancellors. Greg said that that was too long to make an acronym for, so he calls it the EP29 committee. Chip Hunter is the chair of that. Teresa Elliott Cheslick, director of HRS, is on it. Laura Hill, the vice provost for faculty affairs. Sandra Haynes, the WSU Tri-Cities chancellor, and I am on that. We have just met 2 times. One time I was away and met them in a very noisy CTAC where I zoomed into their meeting. And then we had a more substantive meeting, actually 2 meetings on Monday. We met with the president to get our charge, and then we had a longer meeting in the afternoon. So we're really focusing on part of our charge is to look at EP29, and for those of you that don't know that, many of you are familiar with it. It's about the roles of the chancellors, vice presidents, deans, all sorts of people at the university. And it needs updating. It really does need updating and revision, and we're focusing on doing that. So we are meeting to do that. We've been asked by the president to have a progress report for the January 29th leadership retreat and to have the report done by mid-March for the express purpose of informing our provost candidates about what the structure of the university we are envisioning to have and what we might be considering and what they might be part of going forward. In meeting with the president, he is not advocating for any major overhaul of the structure, but he's concerned about the lack of articulation in our system, and I think that that was all brought to the fore for all of us by our 7-week provost that we had this fall. So we're meeting now and over the break, and we've probably going to be working with a consultant. I'm kind of excited about her. Hadn't heard of her before, Susan Finnerty, who has written a book called Master the Matrix. She's somebody that Chip Hunter knew from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and she talks a lot about matrix organization. So we don't have a hierarchical or a linear organization here. We have a matrix. Maybe a malfunctioning matrix, but we have a lot of dotted lines and a lot of people reporting in different ways, and we've got to sort of figure that out, especially before we go forward with our new provost. So that's my report. Thanks. Any questions? Yeah, I know we're running a bit late here. You can all email me if you want.
Good afternoon. My name is David Turnbull. Currently serve as the chair-elect of the Faculty Senate here at Washington State University, and I also serve on the search committee for the new provost. Greg asked me to update you on the search. We've already met. The process is moving forward. Much of what we do and how we go about doing it needs to remain confidential for obvious reasons. But I will tell you that we have 15 people on the committee, including 2 co-chairs, Julie Kamek and Stacy Pearson, who was just here earlier. We have a terrific support staff. We have the best people from Isaacson Miller, the search firm, Attorney General's office, Human Resources, the President's office, And after the first meeting, I left feeling very, very good about things. As the process moves forward, we'll develop a website to keep everybody updated, and the executive committee of the Faculty Senate will make sure that we have a link or links to all of that information to make it as easy for you as possible. So where are we right now? Well, nominations. We need nominations. And you will be able to submit potential candidate names and information directly to Isaacson Miller once we get all this information up on the internet. Think about people from institutions where you used to work. Think about people from the institutions where you earned a degree. Think about people in your professional associations, former mentors and or advisors. Think about people with whom you went to graduate or professional school. Think about former mentees. Also, think about colleagues who were once at Washington State University but were recruited away to a different university. And finally, ask your coworkers to reach out to their network connections. All of this can only help to expand the pool. If you have any questions, please direct all of them to one or both of the co-chairs, Julie Kamek or Stacy Pearson. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Dave and AG. Again, we'll post that on the Faculty Senate webpage. We have a link for the nomination, but we don't have the opportunities and the job description yet for the provost search. And then I'll ask AG as that process rolls out for the EP29. I know it's not called that committee. I'm going to ask him to update that as well, because as he pointed out, that's probably one of the most critical things on our plates right now, especially in the timing of the search for a provost. Are there any additions or changes to today's agenda? Hearing none. Agenda items, action items. Action item 1, recommendation from the Academic Affairs Committee to approve the undergraduate major change bulletin number 5, exhibits L and L1, and Casey is here. Questions? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Did you vote in Vancouver?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. It's hard to see. Action item number 2, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Are there any no's on action item number 1? Okay, it is passed. Thank you. Trying to race through here. Action item number 2, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the Graduate Major Change Bulletin number 3, Exhibit M, and Alex and Umesh Alex is present. Questions? All in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. It passes. Action item number 3, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the MS in Experimental Psychology non-thesis drop plan, exhibits N and N1, and Alex is here to answer any questions. All in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. Action item number 4, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the MS in Clinical Psychology non-thesis drop plan, exhibits O and O1. Alex is here to answer any questions. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes. Yes
Yes.
Any opposition? Please say no. Number 4 passes. Number 5, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the MS in Mathematics non-thesis exhibits P and P1. Alex is here. All in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. Number 5 passes. Number 6, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the MS in Mathematics applied option non-thesis revised graduation requirements exhibits Q and Q1. Any questions? Is that a question? All in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. Okay, number 7, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the MS in Mathematics, Mathematics Teaching Option Non-Thesis Revised Graduation Requirements, Exhibits R and R1. Alex is here. Are there any questions? All in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. Action item 7 passes. Action item 8, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve the MS in Mathematics Computational Finance Option Non-Thesis Revised Graduation Requirements, Exhibits S and S1. And Alex is here to answer any questions. All in favor, please say yes.
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 All opposed, please say no. Action item 8 passes. Discussion items. Discussion item number 1, recommendation from the Academic Affairs Committee to approve the undergraduate major change bulletin number 6. And Casey is here to answer any questions. No questions. Discussion item number 2, recommendation from the Academic Affairs Committee to approve the revised Rule 72, class attendance and absences, Exhibit U. Casey is here to answer any questions. Yes, sir. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, we need a mic.
Thanks. Just raise a couple points, nothing major, but just some thoughts, consideration about some language here that maybe consider revising potentially. Under number 5, other absences, I just wonder about just the casual nature of saying personal circumstances. And I suggest that maybe saying something like extenuating circumstances or extenuating personal circumstances, as opposed to just leaving it so vague as to whatever they consider personal, that gives them a reason. But to add that term in there that gives it some gravity, some sense for them. Again, nothing major, but down at the bottom of that same number 5, it talks about students who attempt to gain advantage. And then in the very last phrase, it says that they be referred for disciplinary action. It almost comes across as a presumption of guilt in that way. They're going to be, turned over for disciplinary action as opposed to for consideration of the case or something like that. So again, just some thoughts in terms of the language and what it's communicating here. Same thing along the F under there, which is the complaints at the very bottom. It says students who are dissatisfied. I wonder if replacing the term dissatisfied with something like who wish to raise a concern about the fairness and or equity of the instructor's policies, et cetera, as opposed to just simple, I don't like this policy, I want to challenge it kind of an attitude that's there. And the last thing I'll bring up, which isn't in here, which I wonder might be good to add in, is every semester I get students that either write to me to tell me that they've already taken the class off or that they need to take the class off because some other professor has scheduled something that is out of the normal, schedule of the classes, whether it's a makeup exam or something else, and they're assuming that I should let them off for this other class, and I respond to them to say, no professor, as I understand it, no professor has the right to require a student to attend some other function of a class, especially one that's for grading purposes, if it interferes with another class that the student is already registered in and participating in. They can't, put out some new additional schedule item that's not at their regular class time and require students to attend that, especially for grading purposes. So just some suggestions in terms of language and another item that maybe says something like instructors are not, permitted to schedule something along these lines. Students are not, don't have the right to miss classes for these kinds of reasons.
Is that on? I just gave another mic to Casey.
I think the wordsmithing suggestions, we can take back and discuss those quite easily. And then I think, Becky, there is somewhere else that addresses the second part.
We should talk offline, but there are a couple of provisions where there's sort of a hierarchy where an instructor might have to grant an absence based on another academic regulation and kind of who gets to have, what am I trying to say? Who gets to have sort of the authority on of the student's time. So let me get with you and I'll tell you more about that and also make sure that I have all your changes. Does that work?
Sure, and I think you're talking about university sponsored. The student is required to participate.
Okay, it's Senator Weller, it's very difficult for people online to hear when you talk to each other that way. So we're going to add it. If there's any other suggestions, you can email me and I will forward them on in terms of just the wordsmithing or what have you. Is that reasonable? And then you guys can talk afterwards. Okay. Sorry, it says, having done the Zoom from Vancouver, I'm now super sensitized at what it's like to be in this room for senators and people off campus. Discussion item number 3, recommendation from the Academic Affairs Committee to approve the undergraduate certificate in water resource science and management to Vancouver, to approve the undergraduate certificate in water resource science and management to Vancouver, exhibits W and W1. And Casey is here. No discussion or questions? Discussion item number 4, recommendation from the Professional Health Sciences Committee to approve the Professional Health Sciences Major Change Bulletin number 2, Exhibit X. And Becky, you're here to discuss if needed.
I'm sorry, you skipped back to the action items instead of the discussion.
I'm reading the discussion items on my agenda.
Yeah, but what you just read is from the agenda items number 4, professional health science.
No? It's discussion item number 4, recommendation from the Professional Health Sciences Committee to approve the Professional Health Sciences Major Curriculum Bulletin number 2. Is there a problem with the online agenda?
Maybe, because I've got under discussion items number 4 under mine is the Graduate Studies Committee to approve MS&P psychology management.
Gail, can you check that?
That's action 4. I'm online. It's fine.
It's fine?
It's fine online.
It's, okay. Is there a problem?
That's number 4 on action, but discussion is correct.
So 4 is not, I'm correct, okay. Okay. Is there any discussion? or questions? Nope. Number 5, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve to discontinue Master of Arts in Hispanic Studies Exhibit Y and Y1. Alex is here to answer any questions. No? Discussion item number 6, recommendation from the Graduate Studies Committee to approve to discontinue the Master of Nursing Plan, Family Nurse Practitioner and Psychiatric Mental Health Exhibits Z and Z1. Alex is here to answer any, Umesh is here to answer any questions.
Yeah, I can answer that.
All right, no questions. We move on to constituent concerns. Mike.
Hi, my name is Luke Hudson, and I'm a reporter with the Daily Evergreen. I just had a clarification question about what exactly happened with the discussion item that was discussed and then not voted on. Is that something that's going to be tabled to the next meeting, or was it approved, or what exactly happened?
Discussion items aren't voted on.
Okay.
All
right.
The discussion item moves to the action item at the next meeting.
I see. Thank you.
And we have one.
Matt Carroll, School of the Environment. This is a comment about the upcoming provost search, a concern I have about it. Without getting into the details of why we had a 7-week provost, it seems to me that Mitzi raised some really important structural issues about how the various campuses are organized and run. And I think she made the point that no other institution like us runs them exactly this way as sort of individual fiefdoms. And there are some disadvantages to that structure. It's a structure that evolved starting when Sam Smith decided to get us into the branch campus business. But I see, within the School of the Environment, I can see a couple of structural problems that maybe need to be addressed or are symptoms of the problem that needs to be addressed. My colleagues in Vancouver, and of course they can speak for themselves, but my colleagues in Vancouver tell me they would like to have a lot more teaching assistants than they have over there, but it's cheaper to hire adjunct faculty to teach than it is to hire teaching assistants. Of course, teaching assistants add to the research program and add to the scholarly output of an institution, but because of the way the budgeting works in Vancouver, the incentive over there is to hire more adjuncts and fewer teaching assistants. And then more recently, we're in the process of putting together an online major that stretches across all the campuses, in particular between Pullman and Vancouver. And yet our colleagues in Vancouver are being told by their administration that tenure track faculty will not be allowed to teach online courses because that's not the mandate. That's not seen as the mandate over there. Their mandate is seen to deal with regional issues within that part of the state, and therefore other people besides tenure track people should be teaching online courses. But the problem is that their contributions to online courses are part of a statewide effort, and I don't think they should be thought of as being quite so separate. My point in raising this about the provost search is that I'm worried that the candidates for provost are going to hear about what happened to Mitzi and therefore be afraid to raise these structural questions, which I think really do need to be addressed. Perhaps not exactly the way she did it, but I would be concerned if the candidates or finalists for the provost job saw what happened with Mitzi and said, well, I'm not going to raise these structural questions because look what happened to Mitzi. I think the questions that she was raising are really important questions, and I think we need to make sure that the provost candidates have the opportunity to play a role in how those structural issues are addressed in the future rather than not. So that's just a concern that I have, and I know there's at least one dean that agrees with me on this, has this same concern.
I would say that there is more than one dean and many chairs and directors. And that's one of the reasons why I'm suggesting that the committee that AG is serving on, that the president put together on EP29, is one of the most important things that we can possibly do right now. Them looking at an external consultant who's an expert in matrix organizational malfunctioning matrix, was that it? M&M? Yeah, that is an expert on that, and given Chip Hunter's expertise in that area as well, I think these are just absolutely critical things. You address the issue of global and teaching and the organizational structure and governance. And EP29, if you haven't read it, is the executive policy that governs or branch camp or other campus, multi-campus systems, how we govern multi-campus systems. And it goes through and gives job descriptions for the chancellors and whatnot. And there are pieces that are missing. It hasn't been updated in a very long time. And there's a question is, does it need to be rewritten or does it need to be updated? All of those things this committee is looking at, and I think it's fair to say that the request was to do this fast, and the reality is it can't be done fast. And we already had a discussion earlier today about how that impacts the provost search. We share your concerns, 100%. And I would say that the issue with global, that's also there because that's budget. And Stacy Pearson, who presented just a little while ago, I cannot tell you, she has my complete confidence in somebody who is transparent. She understands how the system is not functioning. Every campus has a unique budget model, and it's not equitable. And campuses, they decide teaching. They do teaching schedules for their campuses. And in my mind, and I'm just speaking personally, this goes back to my question of what does it mean? In Vancouver, I was there 2 weeks ago. What does it mean to say we're a system? What does that word mean to us? And I think that when we define that, we'll start to get to some of the causes that Mitzi identified. And I'll tell you too that Brian Slinker, when he was here, he pointed out, he didn't diminish what Mitzi said. He said, you know, she identified key areas and he wasn't dropping those. He was moving forward.
I'm glad these issues are on the table, and I just want to make sure that we don't frighten provost candidates away from discussing them. Let's put it that way.
I agree with you. We all agree with you. Any other constituent concerns? And I think that one of our goals is, for as much as Dave can talk about what's going on in the provost search, and there is this whole confidence thing, which you can't really say, but he can update us, and he is representing us, and that committee is almost half faculty. So it's a very different structure than it was last time. All right, if there are no other constituent concerns, we are adjourned. And it will be 2020 next time we see each other. See you.